heard of Madonna? Well, if you have, you would have probably seen one of her music videos that's super iconic, Vogue. If you have, then you also would have seen a couple of paintings by today's artist, Tamara de Lempicka. So, who is Tamara de Lempicka and what the hell is she doing in Vogue? Tamara de Lempicka and Madonna have a couple of things in common. They're both self-made artists, they're both real divas who enjoy luxury, and both women are surrounded by this sexual magnetism. But looking at her music videos, you can really see how Madonna resembles Tamara de Lempicka. Madonna mirrors Lempicka's themes of elusive sexuality, modernization, and high society in her music videos. For God's sake, even her hair is quite similar. Tamara de Lempicka's popularity soars even today. Madonna and Barbara Streisand are among her most notable collectors, and one of her paintings, Adam and Eve, has recently sold on auction for over $21.1 million, the third highest amount ever paid for an artwork by a modern female artist. Even Armani inspired his fashion collection based on Tamara's Art Deco style. And in 2023, Broadway has actually created a full-on play that has encapsulated Tamara's life story in the theatre production. Now, that's massive. So Tamara's not fading away anywhere, but she's kind of coming back into the limelight. But before we get started, in this video, I'll be going deeper into Tamara de Lempicka's artistry by painting a reproduction of her artwork. So you can see the whole process happening right here. Okay, we're going to be painting Polish Girl. And I chose this painting specifically because I'm Polish and Tamara de Lempicka is Polish, and I think it's a perfect example of her cubist and classical style. But also, maybe, it shows Tamara's inner hidden self. Well, at least I think so. For a moment, forget Hollywood and sexiness and Madonna and step into war-torn Europe of 1933, which is when this painting was first painted. Polish girls' plum red lips and large steel blue eyes might otherwise be seductive and alluring, but in this painting, they ooze a coldness that makes you hesitate to approach her, even gaze at her. She looks like a living statue, monumental, cold, and untouchable. Perhaps it's a sentimental tribute to her homeland, Poland. Whilst Tamara herself was a refugee living away, unsure if she will ever return back to war-torn Poland, this feels like a prayer for her country and the memory of her childhood that now is lost. Tamara's choice of Slavic cloth and patterns make the girl look like a saint, or even Mother Mary. The Polish girl resembles Tamara's young daughter, Cosette, or maybe it could even be herself. The image feels biblical and private. The black book is thick and leathery with oil paint. It looks heavy, like a Bible or a holy scripture that she's holding and reading. But the girl is looking away. She's not reading the book. She's staring into the distance with hope, perhaps praying for her homeland that feels just completely lost to her now. The bit about her paint... Sorry, that's the next bit. Tamara de Lempicka has painted using oil paint on canvas and wooden panels. She kind of went in between. She painted using a palette knife and she favoured her brushes throughout her entire life. After all, she is known as the Baroness with a brush. Here are the paints I used for the painting. You can have a look for yourself. I'm not going to go through them because we'll be here all day. But to clean my brushes, I diluted my paint, and to get that smooth effect, I used linseed oil and Bob Ross's odorless paint thinner. Okay, so let's set the stage. Tamara de Lempicka, or back then Maria Górska-Hurwitz, is presumed to be born in 1898 in Warsaw, Poland. She's the kind of woman who hid her age and where she came from and a little bit about her religion. So we know a lot of different information about Tamara, but we're not sure if it's actually true. So, after all, back then, real divas didn't reveal much about themselves, especially their age. What we do know about Tamara is that she was from quite posh circles. She was raised in between governesses, chefs, her grandma and parents, okay? A middle child who always got up to mischief and meddled to get what she wanted. Her father, though, Boris Gurwik-Górski, was a Russian Jewish attorney, whereas her mother, Malwina Gurwik-Górska, came from an affluent Polish family. That's where the money came from, I reckon. Tamara was really young when her dad disappeared. It's all a bit mysterious. Some suggest that he may have abandoned the family, or he has chosen to self-exit. But records of his death are not definitive. But until her deathbed, Tamara has claimed not to remember her father. This event or its mystery marked a turning point in Tamara's life, leading her mother to remarry and depend more on her parents, who are living in Poland. But Nana Clementine was said to be exactly like Tamara. After all, she was incredibly young when she started living with her grandparents in Poland. Her grandparents inspired her love for shopping, fashion, and art. Now, Tamara wasn't your average young girl. Oh no. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was like, I'm destined for greatness. She fell in love with art very early on, through her countless travels. One of those longer travels was actually a bit naughty. Little Tamara faked a long-term illness to get out of her boarding school for girls. So apparently, to seek warmer climates, the little bugger Tamara overheard a conversation between adults. That warmer climates can benefit your health and whatnot. So she convinced her grandma, who took Tamara away for a year-long trip to Italy. Now imagine getting away from school just because he said one fib. One fib and a whole year-long holiday away from school to Italy. Yes, please. First, they took a train to Florence, then Rome, and then Venice. So you can imagine the amount of stuff that Tamara has seen. Where Clementine would take young Tamara around galleries and Italian streets, whispering secrets of tone, paint, light and lines, encouraging the girl to sketch as much as she could, learning from observing Italian masters like Caravaggio. Tamara de Lempicka made this trip regularly throughout her lifetime, even later taking her own granddaughters to get a taste for the Italian beauty. During one of the visits to St. Petersburg, at 15, Tamara went to an adult dress-up party where she spotted a handsome lawyer named Tadeusz Lempicki. Sounds familiar? Still quite an awkward young woman, at 15, Tamara knew she couldn't really match high society denizens of St. Petersburg. The young girl camouflaged herself as a babushka, leading 2 squawking geese into the ballroom. This blows my mind. Imagine a crowd of beautiful 19th century masquerade damsels and gents when suddenly a babushka with geese storms in and steals the show. The crowd loved it, laughing and cheering the sliding geese, and in the crowd, laughing along with everyone, was the handsome Tadeusz Lempicki. She batted her eyelashes and pursued him for only 3 years, and 3 years later, bam, they were married. He was quite the catch, a young, handsome lawyer, after all, a real aristocratic Polish gentleman. Well, when he wasn't having some on the side, not that Tamara would be too bothered. She's known to have a couple of lovers and husbands throughout her life. Despite all that, she was also heavily interested in women. But never mind all that, because at the moment, Tamara is in love with Tadeusz and Tadeusz is in love with Tamara. And soon after the wedding, they had the daughter Kazette. But hold on, just a year after the marriage, the Bolsheviks arrest Tadeusz. And Tamara had to hustle to get him out. Apparently, Tamara has charmed a Bolshevik official into releasing Tadeusz. Some say she bribed and others say seduced. Tamara had a deal made with a man on the inside to get them both papers so that they can travel and escape to Paris. She'd had to trust the man, and travel alone to Paris, where she'd wait there for her husband. She didn't fully trust this stranger to follow through with the papers to escape, but she had to trust her gut. This was her only option. She travelled alone to Paris, as this man requested, with hope that Tadeusz would join her eventually. The little family has fled to Paris. Everyone was now together eventually. As a family, they didn't really have much left. Some jewellery and family heirlooms, something from their aristocratic past. Everything was different though. Even Tadeusz was different after he was returned from the Bolsheviks. Tamara, she didn't feel the same way. She married a handsome, smart and charismatic man, but they returned him a shell of a human, skinny and fidgety. He was there only 3 months, but that's enough to traumatize a person. God knows what he actually went through as a prisoner of Bolsheviks. This was a problem for Tamara because she was the person to kind of value presentation, and she was really bothered by, well, traumatized Tadeusz. You know, he wasn't the same. He wasn't handsome, charismatic and brave, and what he was before they moved to Paris. But at the end of World War I, many people have fled to France. This could have been one of the few times where you'd have an aristocrat like a baron or something like that driving you around as a taxi man. Refugees had basically taken any job at this point. People weren't picky. It was either working as a taxi driver or being poor. This little family also had financial troubles. Tamara kept the family going by selling some of her family heirlooms and jewellery so they could keep it going. It wasn't much, because they were all used to pure luxury. Remember the governesses and the chefs? Well, Kizette didn't really have the same luxury as Tamara growing up. In their relationship, it wasn't going very well either. In a biography that I read, Kizette claimed that her dad was the only man Tamara was truly in love with. Tamara had many romances throughout her life. She was a passionate woman. She was heard to have romances as soon as even her wedding. Apparently her first romance she met at her wedding, but that isn't really definitive. But this could be from different reasons too. Might have been passion, or maybe even hatred towards Tadeusz. She would be seen with bruises very soon after she got married. So Tamara confessed to her sister Adriana that Tadeusz would beat her. Not because of bad tempers, but because they haven't got any money. Like, that's a good excuse. It was through a chat with her sister Adriana that Tamara was reminded of her love for painting, and she could even make a decent living doing it back then. So Tamara enrolled in an art school, Académie de la Grande Chaumière. So the plan was to start earning some money, because she couldn't live off of sold heirlooms, and Tadeusz, well, he was slightly offline at the moment. I actually read somewhere that every time she sold a painting, Tamara would go and buy a diamond bracelet so that she'd have something to sell off if she'd find herself in another refugee situation. Well, she liked to plan ahead. She knew that Tadeusz at the moment wasn't going to earn, so Tamara took charge. The plan is art school and then to be a great painter. And that's how we're going to make our money. That was the plan. Tamara valued education. She's gone to multiple art schools through her life. And in fact, I heard this really quirky story from my own, favourite Polish podcast, Nie-Winna Sztuka. So if you're Polish and you understand it, oh my God, go and listen to it. It's so good. But I also read it in Tamara's biography, that at 40 years old, apparently, Tamara enrolled into a school for teen girls to train further, in art. 40-year-old Tamara de Lempicka, she forged her parents' signature, bought herself flat shoes, and even took her nail polish off, which was her trademark look, right? So that's a big thing to do. She's took her nail polish off. She's bought herself some flat shoes. She's undivaed herself and turned into a teenage girl, right? She apparently enjoyed herself quite a lot in the school. She flirted with some teen boys, apparently, and made friends with young girls, which all of this I find so disturbing in general. She was eventually found out by her art teacher, who said, and I'm quoting here, "What's with this masquerade? I know all the amateur artists in the world who are worth knowing, and the painting style of Tamara de Lempicka, her work, her golden skin tones are so characteristic that I come to a conclusion that you are Tamara de Lempicka, but I won't kick you out. I'm not going to expose you. You must have a good reason to do so, to continue this masquerade." So Tamara got away with it. But that was a little jump to the future, because at the moment we just got her first art school experience in Paris. She was a really good student from what I read. This is where she found her feet as a painter. Some still lifes, portraits, landscapes, the usual. What she really enjoyed was the Italian Renaissance painters though. Caravaggio and Botticelli. This really shines through in her paintings, especially in the skin tones and how the oil paint glazes over and blends seamlessly. At the start of her art university life, she was surrounded by art like Cubism and postmodernism like Maurice Denis. Maurice Denis? Maurice Denis? She wasn't particularly bothered by the trends. In fact, she claimed that she never intended on copying anyone, but always wanted to create something new. She can't deceive us though. I can see things. Looking at her paintings, the classical Renaissance and Cubism shine through in her Art Deco painting style. Yes, her style has that characteristic Tamara de Lempicka look that hasn't been done before, yes, but it has been greatly influenced by those classical masters that she has seen in the museums and galleries during fabulous trips abroad with Grandma Clementine, right? So you can see it in her work. It's a beautiful combination of styles, and that's what makes her quite unique, right? It's so characteristically Tamara. It hasn't been done before. We love it. At the age of 24, Tamara exhibited Portrait of Young Lady in a Blue Dress at her very first Paris exhibition at Salon d'Automne. The portrait showed her well-off neighbour, a friend, and lover, Ira Pero. So it's a loose painting, almost impressionist, and Tamara had a really good understanding of Van Gogh and Gauguin styles at the time, which comes through in the expressive brushstrokes. Ira fills the entire canvas, and that's something that Tamara did in all of her portraits later on. She once said in the biography I've read that people thought I had made a mistake, that I chopped off a piece of her head, but I wanted people to look like they ran in and out leading a busy life. This reflected her interest in the modernization and the creation of something, new, and Cubism was just that. Fast-paced and encapsulating the new industrial world. The cars just came on the scene not too long ago, and the skyscrapers began to be built, not to mention how feminism is also changing women's perception and how things are run around the house. Not that Tamara was a feminist. I don't think they cared much for her and vice versa. She wasn't a feminist, but a progressive woman who did what she wanted. Female artists still had a tough time breaking into the scene though. So now, and for the next 5 years, Tamara will sign T. de Lempicka. It represents the masculine form, believing she can be taken a little bit more seriously as an artist. From the very start, she prices her works on a par with well-established male painters, and good for her for doing that. She had a painting that was priced the same as an artist Kees van Dogen, and that was for about 10,000 francs. This meant that she can paint female sexuality without the judgment of being a mother and a woman painter. Tamara painted Ira Pero countless times until they had a breakup. After many years of friendship. Her figure is dynamic, modern, and sexual in her other portraits as well. They are kind of more to what she usually would do, the gleaming golden paint that is really put into little boxes and coloured in. Unlike the blue dress, now that was a little bit more loose. Ira became a guinea pig for Tamara, and to be fair, she was a bit of a Tamara's muse. She's come to her own practicing Ira's portraiture. Ira was a playmate, but Tamara had many, playmates. After all, she was a modern woman in the 1920s, embracing her sense of freedom. In Tamara de Lempicka's biography, there's a little about what her Parisian routine was like, and it was pretty wild for a mother and a wife. She often woke up quite late in the morning, and good for her, socialised during the day in the Parisian Montmartre cafes, where all the artists and poets regularly mingled. And she fit right in with the creme de la creme of Parisian society. She oozed that magnetic energy and could connect with people all around Europe. After all, Tamara de Lempicka could speak 5 languages. And that's all because of her grandma and her growing up in St. Petersburg and travelling around Europe. That's where she got it from. In the cafes, they were curious about her elusive personality, but Tamara wasn't really interested in boring chats about art and poetry too much. Instead, she'd observe beautiful people and think about the paintings she's been doing back at home. Despite her busy social life, she would always go back home in the afternoon and put Cosette to bed and say prayers with her. Even one time I read in the biography that Tamara would force her to bless her and her entire family in those prayers so that, God keeps an eye on them. And Cosette one time refused to do it. And then Tamara got really, really mad and she would make her pray until she blessed the entire family. But after the prayers, Tamara would also go out into the operas and events or jazz parties where, drinks were flowing and cocaine and opioids were flying around and they were all a little bit, high on life. Afterwards, she'd sometimes walk down the River Seine at night when the moon is shining bright and you can smell the sewage of the river, where Tamara would enter brothels and indulge in her promiscuity with both men and women. And yeah, then she would go back home after all of that and she would digest it. And she would then, just create her paintings until the morning. And that was the routine. She would paint all the way through the night until morning. So then she would go back into bed, obviously, and wake up again at midday and then go back into the cafes and then go back home for a bit, then go back out. Oh my God, it was a routine. She did it so often and she did it. And that was her life. Let's analyze one painting from that time period. And it's called The Group of Four Nudes from 1926, showing an overlay of bodies bending and stretching into each other. This painting is bold, but Tamara had a collection of really spicy paintings, so if you want to go and have a look, please enjoy. The shallow background of this picture has this effect of making these women feel even more compressed within the space, with skin rubbing and breaths colliding and bodies touching each other. Art historian Joan Cox argues that Lempicka has chosen to crop her view of the female bathers tightly and give the viewer, a presumably female viewer, the experience of joining in the frolicking. She invites the female viewer in as a lover rather than creating an experience for a male viewer as a distant voyeur into this all-female public space. This painting reminds me of another womanizer artist. You might have heard of this one, Pablo Picasso, especially his paintings of prostitutes, Les Damoiselles d'Avignon, or The Ladies of the Avignon. After all, Picasso was showing a bunch of prostitutes as sexy, distorted monsters. Lempicka, however, she flips that dynamic, and in a way, she excludes male viewers altogether from this painting. Well, maybe some people would argue about that. Lempicka is showing the fullness of female sensuality, though, and drama of feminine sexuality. Sometimes it was a model, a friend, or even just someone who she would spot at an opera or theatre. Yeah, Tamara would ask random women to pose nude for her paintings, and very often they'd agree. Of course, only if they really fit with her vision. In the biography, there's a letter explaining how Tamara asked people of society to pose for her. And it goes a little bit like this. One night, I went to the theatre with 2 handsome boys. You see, I needed attention like that. I saw a pair of bare shoulders in front of me, and when the light came up, she turned and I saw her profile. I thought I was painting in my studio, a big painting of 5 women, and I could not find a woman for the fifth figure. I said to my boys then, "This is the face I need. Look, I want to speak to this lady. Wait outside because I don't know how she will react." And they said, "No, you can't ask her. She's a lady. You can't." So she's gone to go and talk to her, and the lady, well, she's agreed. So the next day, Tamara de Lempicka was waiting in the studio for the lady to come, and there she was. She appeared for one of her portraits. This is how Tamara made her fame, however. By showing up in the right places and speaking with the right people. She felt the moment and she just went with it. After practicing portraiture on friends, family, and models, Tamara was receiving some notoriety quickly within galleries and the talking high society of nobles. So she was making her name out there and she was doing really well for herself, earning the money, getting some nice commissions. The paintings weren't always nude, though. Her portraits often were of dressed people. Those were quite sought after as commissions. Well, like, this one over here. Young girl in green gloves. Cropped in, full of movement, fabric that's resembling gleaming metal and steel. It's a classic look for Tamara's portraits. Another really good royal example is a portrait of a daughter of Lempicka's friend, the Greek-born Duchess Marica della Sol Romana. This lady was an aristocrat by marriage to another duke from that country. But the Duchess went on to divorce her wealthy husband, and she received quite a lot of money from this split up. So the Duchess used this newfound financial freedom to commission female artists of the era to paint her portraits. How lovely, supporting artists of the world. Very good. This portrait is a landmark composition of the Art Deco era and is considered one of Lempicka's best in her body of work. Known for championing the concept of new woman, Lempicka made a habit of flipping the script on traditional gender roles, even the way she composed Romana in a petal pink asymmetrical draped knee-length dress. Now, this is a very classic look for a girl, isn't it? Oh my god, a girl in a pink dress. But back then, at the time, the colour pink represented strength, power, and masculinity. I love how that was just not even 100 years ago. Pink was initially considered slightly masculine version of the diminutive of red, right? Which was thought to be like a warlike colour, red, aggression, blood. But pink was also aggressive and a little bit, spicy. So that's very different from what we have going on now, and that's changed a lot. But blending influences from Renaissance art, incorporating her signature dramatic chiaroscuro and borrowing a pose borrowed from Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, Romana wears bold makeup against a backdrop of geometrical skyscrapers. It's a very feminine painting, in my opinion, but back then, that was flipping the script on these gender roles. The portrait to Romana de la Selle previously belonged in the collection of a German fashion designer, Wolfgang Jupp, for over 20 years. So it's a big deal, this painting, and she got quite a bit of notoriety for it. We are around the wartime now, so we are in between the wars, and back then, she painted portraits of writers, entertainers, artists, scientists, industrialists, and many of Eastern Europe's exiled nobility. Her daughter, Cosette de Lempicka, wrote in her biography of Tamara de Lempicka, Passion by Design it's called. She painted them all the rich, the successful, the renowned, the best, and with many she also slept. The work brought her critical acclaim, social celebrity, and considerable wealth. This is when Tamara reached the height of her career, and with a visual representation of Art Deco that was unlike anything else seen at the time. In 1929, she painted one of her most famous works, Self-Portrait in a Green Bugatti. That would become the most famous and recognizable icon of Art Deco painting. On the canvas, the subject looks defiantly at the camera and paints herself in the driving seat, usually occupied by a man. However, this time she's alone. She's going fast through the metallic city as a modern woman. She is free to choose where she is going. It was commissioned by the front cover of the German fashion magazine Die Dame, and is a mix of the artist's unique and personal style. Fully covered surface, geometric and outline areas, metallic reflections that make it almost impossible to distinguish between metal and fabric, and a blatant challenge to the male gaze. This painting screams, so what? I'm driving a Bugatti, have a nice walk, loser. That's what it's giving me. And you know what? Tamara was a little bit like that. She just kind of exuded this energy of, I want to be free and I want to go where I choose to go. And she's going to do it in this new, modern, metallic world. So it's been like 10 years since we talked about Era Pero in this video and the girl in the blue dress. And we haven't really mentioned her husband and her daughter much, have we? I mean, I haven't really forgotten them. They're just, in the background. And it was a little bit like that in her life as well, to be honest. The rumours caught up with Tamara, and Tadeusz found out all about the affairs and the crazy parties and the drug taking. And Tamara had a full artistic life, and her paintings were always the priority, and he wasn't happy about it. After Tamara had a big break around 1929, Cosette said that, and I quote that from the biography, after the exhibitions, mother changed. She thought that being an artist excused everything. If Tadeusz has slapped and bruised her, Tamara would usually give back as good as she would get. I read in the biography that she chased him around the flat with a kitchen knife because Tadeusz kind of complained about her nightlife and the rumours that he heard. When Cosette was 60 years old, later on when she wrote the biography, she would also say that he would retaliate with honesty. And it was written that he said something like this: you care most about your painting, and then about whom you impress. You ignore your own daughter. Tamara replied, I love Cosette with all of my heart and soul, but the soul of an artist has many needs. They clearly had a troublesome marriage, and he cheated on Tamara too, so they were kind of even by this point. And predictably, like every artist, Tamara turned to her easel to exercise her sorrows. In her Art Deco style, she painted Tadeusz looking distinguished, tall, dark, handsome, like a gentleman, but notice that there's no wedding ring on his finger. So when we were looking at pictures of Tamara de Lempicka and actual photographs of her, very often you would see her dabbing away at this painting. And it makes me think that she definitely painted over the years, but, she never finished it. And the last bit that she didn't finish was that wedding ring. So Tadeusz at the time has said that he wants to move to Poland, and that's permanently. That's when she decided she will never finish this painting and called it The Unfinished Man. In 1933, she got divorced with Tadeusz, but she kept his name throughout her entire life. Cosette said that despite all of her husbands and lovers, she always felt that Tadeusz and Tamara were the one true love that they had, and Tamara could never replace him with anybody else. She wasn't moping around for very long, to be fair, after her divorce. She bounced back pretty quickly. She met a really rich Baron Roel Kuffner, who took good care of her, right on the brink of World War II as well. So that's very lucky. They had a good partnership rather than a relationship, based on, honesty rather than love. Tamara was honest and, she would be very open about her sexual life and what she expected from her partner. But they weren't very passionate themselves. Apparently they were incredibly good friends though. In fact, there's no indication that they had sex ever. So at this time, Tamara de Lempicka was still kind of traveling around, and she went to America a couple of times to do a couple of commissions by some very high-end society people. And, she got a taste for it and she really enjoyed it. But, she came back to Paris and she continued her job and, doing her own paintings. But Baron Raoul Kuffner has at that time also decided that maybe they should move to America because this was on the brink of war. They decided that they would be way safer there. So Tamara very kindly got to choose the destination to match her aspirations and lifestyle. So guess where they went? They went to Hollywood. Once she got to America, she never really got the reception that she kind of expected. Everybody in the States thought that she was a hobby artist who painted for fun. In 1949, they moved again, this time settling in New York, where she continues to paint, but in a style more reminiscent of the old masters that she once admired back in the youth. Then her work from the 1930s. So she kind of left behind a little bit of that cubisty style and started leaning towards the classical. Once de Lempicka got to New York, she would be called the Baroness with a Brush. And she showed her work at a couple of galleries, but she could never really rise to the name she got in Europe. When the United States entered the war, de Lempicka retreated to her home and primarily painted, not really engaging in the society as much. Her subjects changed from the carefree women of the 1920s and 30s to religious and lower-class figures. For example, the Mother Superior and Beggar with Mandolin, both painted in 1935, and even Polish Girl that we are painting in this video. The war and the fear for Poland, Paris and Italy spilled out onto the canvas and gave us the production of sentimental, religious, artistic prayer that this is. Unfortunately, though, her move to America was the beginning of the end for Tamara's artistic peak. Her Art Deco style looked out of fashion in this period of post-war art, when Jackson Pollock, Salvador Dali and de Kooning were all ruling the scene. They wanted something new. The society wanted something fresh. She expanded her subject matter to include things like still life, but goddammit, people are bored of still life at this time, and they wanted something new. In the 1960s, she began to paint abstract works and to use, a palette knife instead of her smooth, earlier brushwork, in a desperate attempt to keep up with the fast-moving trends of the art world. She sometimes reworked earlier pieces in her new style. The crisp and direct Amethysti in 1946 became the Pink and Fuzzy Girl with Guitar in 1963, for example. In that time, she also had a couple of wartime efforts where they moved to Cuba with her husband, the new husband, and she would really be bothered by all the poverty going around. So they went there and they had a couple of charity events, and apparently Tamara designed the female military uniform. But in general, she was very, into fashion. It was one of the things she, I think, enjoyed the most, apart from paintings and partying. But she really enjoyed sewing her own dresses, so she would never admit it. However, because this is a skill assigned to a lower class, not a baroness. Later on, after World War II ended, she, went back to Paris and had a couple of shows in May and June in 1961. But it didn't revive her earlier career, and she could never go back to what she had. Baron Kuffner also has died of heart attack in November 1961 on the ocean liner en route to New York. Following his death, Lempicka has been absolutely devastated, and she fell into a deep, deep depression and thought she could never get back from, her heartbreak. She also sold off most of her possessions and made 3 around-the-world trips by ship. But in 1963, Lempicka moved to Houston, Texas, to be with her daughter Cosette and her family, where she finally retired from her life as a professional artist. So, at the end of her life, she would repaint a lot of her work. One of them was Autoportrait from 1929, and she painted it twice. In 1974, she decided to move to Mexico, where apparently it was an area of eccentric artists and writers. And she had her last young male friend there, where she would, chat with him and paint, and he himself was a painter. His name was Victor. So they would spend their entire days just chatting away about paintings, going on long walks, and having a nice time. It was a non-sexual relationship, but more of a companionship. So they got quite close, but there was a bit of drama that unfolded at the end of her life between Tamara and Cosette. So they got so close that in a drama between Tamara and Cosette, Tamara kind of put Victor in her will and replaced Cosette, basically. And that's all because Cosette refused to move to where Tamara was living, and that's because Cosette's husband was battling cancer. And Tamara generally was okay, so she didn't need care. In fact, she had a carer, and Cosette was just needed alongside her husband, and she just couldn't understand that. So Tamara has made a cheeky move and she changed Gazette to Victor, basically. And everything that was going to go to Gazette kind of went to Victor instead. Of course, it didn't happen. He stayed in the will, but it was amended again. So after the death of Gazette's husband in 1979, she decided to move to Cuernavaca, where De Lempicka was staying, and her health was rapidly declining. De Lempicka died in her sleep on 18th March 1980. There was a little bit of mystery and murder mystery around De Lempicka's death, because there was a rumor that the nurse has switched off Tamara's face mask that she needed to help her breathe through her sleep. And that's because the nurse herself was in the will. There was one clause in the will that suggested that basically she won't get the money unless she takes care of Tamara through up until her death. But of course you may have like speeded up the death process, right? So there's a bit of a rumor about that, but obviously we'll never find out whether that's true or not. Tamara de Lempicka has one last dying wish, and that was to spread her ashes and scatter them over a volcano in Pompeii. So that was her last dying wish. And apparently it was a bit of an issue, but Victor made it happen in the end, and hopefully she can settle beyond in her afterlife. Obviously, Tamara de Lempicka died, but her work lives on and costs more than ever before. Apart from being capitalized by Madonna herself, remember all those music videos from the start of this video? Tamara also featured in Madonna's tour set in 2020. So this is all still really fresh, and she's still being influenced by Tamara's work. Tamara de Lempicka also had a whole Broadway show made about her, and this has been quite recent. I think it's been over the past couple of years. So I really would love to see the recording of that Broadway show, and I'm not gonna lie, but I can't find it at the moment. After Tamara de Lempicka's death in 1980, interest in her work increased, and her paintings became more expensive at an auction than ever. Her paintings have sold off for millions of dollars, with some of the most expensive works by women painters in the world. For example, the portrait de Marjorie Ferry sold for £16,380,000 at Christie's London in 2020, so that's really recent, and she's setting a new auction record for her work with this painting. Another artwork that she sold for a lot was The Musician, sold for $9 million in 2018, becoming the highest auction painting by a Polish artist at the time. Even the way I first heard of Tamara de Lempicka in the first place was through my dad and uncle, who haven't got much interest in art, to be honest, but love everything that's Polish, because we're Polish, so...
How very Polish of you.
How very Polish of you. So she's clearly in the mainstream now, if my dad knows about her. But I don't think it's a mainstream to know what a sassy, sexy diva she really was, you know? I think that bit isn't really that known about Tamara de Lempicka. Anyway, here's the finished painting of the Polish girl by Tamara de Lempicka. We have been painting it throughout the entire video, and I hope you enjoyed it, because I've really enjoyed the process. It made learning about her so much more interesting. I painted this whilst learning about her, so I made a couple of mistakes in the process because I've been reading and then I've been painting, but I missed a couple of things. One of the things I missed was the pigments. So I used obviously oil paint that I had in my house, it's from the tube, but she would mix her own pigments, which was really impressive. Even later on in her life, Gazette's husband mixed her pigments for her, which was nice. I really enjoyed this process, and that's all that matters really at the end of the day. It was really fun learning about her and how to paint, and I'm going to try and go into the techniques and process of painting a little bit more in the future, because I think there is a side of that is really interesting. I just have to get ahead of the research a little bit. But this was fun. Thank you so much for sticking around for this long, and please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more art history videos like this. Hope you have a lush day, and see you in the next one. Thank you. Yeah, and